Hello and welcome to today's session, hosted by the Sales Management Association. Our webcast will start in just a few moments. First, some very quick announcements. First, please note that we will not open attendees' audio or video lines during today's live broadcast. However, we do very much welcome your questions and comments. We'll leave some time to address them during today's session, and you may submit those at any time. There are a few ways to do that. And we'll remind you of those using this little scrolling message on the bottom of the screen right now. The easiest way is simply to click onto the video screen and enter your question in chat there. Another way is to email them. You may email them directly to us at support@salesmanagement.org. We're standing by to read those as they come in. Also, another announcement, just as a reminder, today's session will be recorded. We'll make it available for playback in the Sales Management Association's resource library. Sales Management Association members will also be able to download copies of slides used in today's session there in our resource library. Our session today is one in a series of web-based Sales Management Association presentations that feature practitioners and thought leaders in the field of Salesforce effectiveness. The Sales Management Association is a professional association for sales operations, sales enablement, and sales leadership professions. We provide our members with research, case studies, peer networking, and professional development opportunities. There's the slide I want. If you are joining us for the first time, first of all, we're very pleased to have you. And we encourage you to consider membership in the Sales Management Association. And while you're here on our website, look around at sales here at salesmanagement.org. We encourage you to familiarize yourself with our many resources and consider membership. Also, please save the date for our upcoming conference. The date is actually shown incorrectly on this slide. It is March 12th and 13th, where we'll have our annual conference, this time hosted in Atlanta at the Gazweta Business School at Emory University. We hope you can join us for that. I am Bob Kelly. I am Sales Management Association Chairman, and today it's my pleasure to introduce three esteemed panelists who will join us for our discussion today. I'd like to do that now. Our first panelist is Ken Abel. Ken Abel is Sales Director at Trailstone Insurance Group, an independent insurance agency representing more than 25 companies that offer auto, home, business, and life insurance. Trailstone operates in Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Utah, and Washington here in the United States. Ken provides direction to a large team of independent agents as well as Trailstone's direct sales organization. He began his insurance career as an independent insurance agent with Trailstone, and previous to that worked in graphic design and marketing management for a number of firms. We're pleased to have you with us. Welcome, Ken Abel.
Thank you, Bob.
There you are. And our next panelist is Kenneth Johnson. He is a diversity recruiter and career services professional. As founder and president of the diversity recruiting firm East Coast Executives, he develops talent sourcing strategies and global diversity recruiting programs for the firm's clients. Kenneth was named 2022 Business Leader of the Year by the National Diversity Council. He was recognized by Black Enterprise Magazine as a BE Modern Man and Forbes Media as a Forbes Career Coach and Council member. A TEDx speaker, he is an organizer of TEDx Harlem and also serves as a Google On-Air Career Workshop facilitator, Indeed Jobcast instructor, and host of the National Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. Kenneth is quite busy. Kenneth is also the developer of an app. It's called blackbox.tech, designed to support the careers of Black men. We're pleased to have you, Kenneth Johnson. Welcome.
Thank you so very much, Bob. I really appreciate the opportunity to join the platform today. And thank you to SMA and SalesScreen for the opportunity to share. Looking forward to it.
Indeed. Thank you. And Our third panelist is Louis Whirlidge. Louis is Vice President of Sales at SalesScreen, whose global sales platform combines gamification with data visualization to keep modern sales teams motivated and engaged. Before joining SalesScreen, Louis held senior sales leadership roles at BeaconStack HQ, Zazek, and Reward Gateway. We're also pleased to have you. Welcome back, Louis Whirlidge. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Terrific. So our panel is assembled. It is the appointed hour. Let us talk about this topic. And I'll give you some just very quick perspective on this topic of retaining top sales talent. We found some really unusual things happening in the labor market, at least compared to the previous 2 or 3 business cycles, which were characterized maybe as virtually unlimited access to available talent, a nice equilibrium of high employment rates, but also firms could easily source and find candidates. Things have changed since then, and with the combined effects of slightly wobbly economic issues as well as the impact of COVID, firms are finding things are substantially different in the labor market. And this might be a good thing for us to talk about first. What is happening related to talent management, and in particular with firms' efforts to retain top sales talent? So what are some of the challenges that we're seeing in this area? If I may, I'm going to ask you to chime in first, Kenneth Johnson.
Yeah, sure. So the challenges kind of exist in people's inability or ability to build employee engagement, right? Getting recognition and rewards programs right. And a lot of that goes back to just, are you recruiting the right employees from the beginning? I know we've spoken in the past just about how are you creating your onboarding experience? What's that like in relationship to you identifying the right employees and then bringing them in with goals aligned and a plan that allows them to be successful? And a lot of times that's just about providing avenues for professional development. So the challenges exist in the structure in which people are bringing employees along, but also nurturing and developing that talent moving forward.
Yeah, good. I wonder if your comments reinforce something that I suspect, which is a lot of firms considered sales employees perhaps expendable, especially in entry-level jobs like sales development reps, where many folks wash out. And I think the tide is turning a little bit. Firms are less keen to accept a high level of employee churn in those positions and are now thinking more long-term, investing more in recruiting, employees that have more long-term potential.
Yeah, churn is real and it's costly. It's extremely costly.
Yeah, especially when supply is limited. So, let's talk about a few other things. In fact, let's talk about the changes in the workforce. What are some of those changes that we're seeing in the workforce, in particular with sales roles, and how are these changes impacting what salespeople want when they think about sticking with a role? Sorry, my job as moderator is simple. I just read the questions and I pick someone to ask the question to. So I didn't do that second thing. So let me actually have Ken Abel talk about this one. Ken.
Yep, happy to, Bob. Yeah, workers' priorities have shifted, right? Money isn't always their primary motivator anymore. People value flexibility in their schedule and the location they can work over a higher salary. And like Kenneth said too, that when that onboarding experience, when we're hiring people, why are they leaving their job in the first place? It's because they're lacking training, they're lacking that engagement, that motivation, mentorship, support. So it's a shift in the way we interact with our employees now. We have to provide all those things that are missing in their current careers.
Other thoughts here? What's changing?
Yeah, if you don't mind me chiming in here,
Please.
The whole remote work environment and your ability to build relationships even outside of the walls of the building, right? It's a different skill set for managers and leaders of organizations to really make those connections and relate, and also to do that with equitable results, right? To be fair in that process. And you have a group of people that are fine and comfortable working in that fashion. And then, of course, there's another side of the coin. There are people that need a little more. And, how do you balance that and support your team for success moving forward?
I think to take that point even a little bit further, I think there's also the question around visibility, because when you kind of encourage an environment where people have more flexibility, inevitably as a manager, it makes it much, much harder to have visibility over what's happening within your team. So having the right tool set, essentially just to understand what's happening within that team on a wider scale, is a big, big challenge, I think, for a lot of sales managers, myself included, is like, how do you make sure that every single person in that team is doing all the things that they would normally do? When you're sat in a room together, it's a lot easier than when, you're potentially 200, 300 miles apart from one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I may, I want to try to unpack a couple of things in what we're talking about here. So you've mentioned a few times the importance of a remote workforce, being able to support a remote workforce. This is just logistically a different way of working, and it seems to have really been accelerated because of the global pandemic. So it also seems to reflect a bit of a cultural shift in what workers want, which is we want the flexibility to work from home, and we value this. Ken Abel, your opening remark was people maybe value this more than they might value even pay. So is this because workers are younger, or what's going on here? Is this a temporary thing? Will we see?
I don't think age has anything to do with it,
honestly.
It's just the world we live in now. Post-COVID, people have got a taste of working from home, and they like it. Our sales force has been remote by design since 2013. So we've been working on this for a long time here. So when COVID hit us, that didn't really affect us at all. But it is important to create that engagement and that culture virtually. That's a big challenge for a lot of companies.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed, it is. Well, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about something you mentioned as well, Ken. It's one of the times in a new hire's career that they are most susceptible to leaving the firm, and that is during onboarding. We know from our own research, benchmarking research on retention and employee churn, that almost half of undesirable employee churn happens during onboarding very early in a new hire's tenure. So how do we ensure success when we are onboarding new employees? Ken Abel, I'll stick with you on this one. How do you guys treat this issue there?
Yeah. It's committing to their success, right? And helping them understand that you truly are committed to their success. And it goes beyond that initial training period. You got to provide ongoing training year round, and not only training their sales skills, but also their people skills as well. Some people right now, they've never even had a in-person work environment. They started their career remotely online. So building those people skills is crucial as well, and helping them develop that way. But it's also about encouraging engagement with their peers. That's how I feel like we've been successful. When people come on board, they're scared and nervous to ask, what they say, stupid questions, right? Or they just don't want to ask a question at all. So they always go to the sales trainer, constantly trying to ask one-on-one questions. So encouraging them to reach out to their peers and bringing them in slowly over time into that group. That way, their team, they feel like they're part of a team, and they get that support is huge. And the other thing we like to help our agents with is helping them understand their why. Many people in the workforce don't understand why they do what they do. If you ask them that right off the bat, they'll answer with a goal or an objective to, to make more money or to take care of my kids, that sort of thing. But that's not really why they do what they do every day. So we try to help our new producers figure that out. And once they figure that out, once they have all that support and that engagement from our peers, and they really have experienced that commitment to their success, that just drives them to further want to succeed themselves, right?
You're talking about a sense of purpose and maybe sort of intrinsic motivation around why people are working. I'm guessing that's how you mean that phrase. Why do you do that? It's not meant in the sense of, hey, why are you doing that? That's how the
Right.
managers I'm accustomed to are. That's their interpretation. So why are you doing that?
Right. It's the Simon Sinek why, right? Like,
yeah.
Why do you get out of bed every day? Why do you
Yeah.
go to work? Why do you do this particular job? Why do you sell this particular product? Why do you take your kids to school? It's all encompassing.
Well, one thing we know about the workforce now is that it is skewing toward a younger demographic who does, value more of a sense of purpose, especially early in their careers. And so it'd be interesting to know, Ken or Lewis or Kenneth, how we communicate this. How do we help people attach to something bigger than just the sort of mercenary or superficial reasons for showing up to work?
I think that's a really good question, because obviously there's a whole bunch of different whys that anyone might have in their lives, but it's that red thread, right? As a business, what's our common goal? What's our why that we exist as an organization, and trying to find the right folks that fit in with that same sense of purpose. And I think for me, it's a real question of enablement, right? Especially during that onboarding process. So as soon as someone comes into the business, having a really clear understanding of what that business is, what success looks like, and how to get there. And I think the way to do that is to have a really structured onboarding process with really key objectives, clear milestones, incentives laid out in front of you in terms of how you get there. And a slightly biased opinion from me is the easiest way to do that is through gamifying it. So obviously SalesScreen is a gamification company. So we talk about this morning, noon and night. But when someone comes into a business, they need to have a clear list of the things that they need to accomplish over the course of their onboarding period. And how do you get them to do that? You draw it up for them. You make it really simple and easy for them to digest. And you create competition around it. You gamify it. You recognize when they reach those milestones and those goals, and you make them feel good from day one about all the different pieces of work they're doing to get up to speed, rather than it feeling like a mountain they've got to climb. It feels like more bite-sized chunks that they're tearing away at, and ultimately just to get to the end goal of ringing that bell and becoming a fully fledged member of the sales team.
Yeah, great. I'm looking forward to exploring this concept more with your input, Lewis. This notion of gamification. This is something that we've talked about before to our audience, and there's some interesting applications here. I want to be sure to revisit that. Before we leave this topic, though, please, Kenneth. Yeah, I know you had maybe something to add related to onboarding.
Yeah, well, just in general, if you don't mind, listen.
Yeah.
They got me excited. Ken and Lewis had me excited. I wish I was a young sales professional and I could come work for those two, right? That's how you kind of get where you need to go. But, when people are coming in, are you building a compelling brand identity? Are you hiring in line with your company culture? Are you using a candidate-centered interview process just to make sure that is the right candidate for your organization? And also showing that candidate a clear roadmap. I think there are some things that really set people up for success. And I think that's a crucial part of that onboarding process. And if you just listen to these two gentlemen, and you can understand why they've been successful and why their teams are succeeding, because they're literally laying out a roadmap and caring for the individuals that are coming in the door and setting them up for success. And I think that's where the ownership lies. I think often we look 90 days from now and we say, all right, why isn't someone succeeding? But how did they start? And what did we do to ensure that their foundation was really solid from the beginning? And I think that's really important. So thank you two for conveying that, because I just think it's the missing piece often.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Well, let me ask you a question that really gets to the heart of today's topic, which is about engagement. I guess that's the popular term. It's a way of describing the extent that employees sort of buy in to the experience of working for a company. And it is a proxy word to substitute for satisfaction, I think, right? I mean, we equate higher engagement, so-called, with higher levels of employee satisfaction. People like their jobs when they're more engaged in things. And so what we need to talk about today is how do we drive higher levels of engagement, especially with those most valuable members of our team. So now, Lewis, might be the time to visit some of the concepts that your firm has around this topic. And may I, I want to do something kind of reckless. I want to try to paraphrase my understanding of how you think about this. Because I find it interesting because it's a novel, it's new. It's also interesting in that you're thinking about gamification in ways different than how the term is used. In other words, my understanding of how you guys think about the world is that you have this theory that actually comes from the design of video games, where researchers have identified, what drives engagement in a game. How do you continue? How do you drive participation and interest and those kinds of basic things? And you've identified some archetypes. So I'm going to ask you to maybe share these basic sort of archetypes or types of players, if you will, and how that works in driving engagement. But I think the key issue here is thinking about gamification not as simply a way of making things simple and keeping score, which is how many firms consider that term, but thinking it as a foundational basis for engagement, just as you would if you're designing videos. I hope that's a fair approximation of what you guys do. Is that
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay.
In terms of like SalesScreen, what we do is we basically gamify the sales process, right? And I think the way we think of it is that it can impact. I think actually I'll take a step back. I think it's important to like think about how engagement is directly impacts sales teams.
Yeah.
And I think there are two parts to it. I think one is culture, and I think the other part is metrics, improving the bottom line, creating an ROI for a business, right? When I think of gamification, I think of it. I mean, I've worked in culture, employee engagement for many, many years, but in terms of employee gamification, it's a really, really effective way at encouraging people to, one, compete, and two, to feel part of a culture. So there are a whole bunch of different ways you can drive engagement, whether it's gamification, whether it's recognition, training, incentives, a whole bunch of other things. The key for me, and I think that you briefly touched upon this, the key is like acknowledging the fact that there are different profiles and characters within every team. And that's particularly pertinent for sales, I think. Like I think you can liken it to something like Myers-Briggs, the type indicators, where you have different profile types, and it's about appealing to those different groups in different ways. And the screen that you're sharing right now is Bartle's taxonomy of players. And that is essential, it's kind of like the equivalent of like a Myers-Briggs, but specifically for gamers.
Bartle is not an organization design guy. He's like a video gaming design guy, right? And his ideas have been adopted now by your firm and others in management because they're ethical.
Exactly right. And the thing about them is that what they basically do is they kind of help us understand why people compete, why people play games, right? And it's different for lots of different types of players. So if you're breaking it down really simply, you've got your killers. The killers are your top 10%. They're the people that just go out there and perform. They do what they need to do. They hit their targets. They achieve the goals that they need to achieve. They make up 10%, but then you've got other groups as well, and they make up the other 90%. So they're really, really important. And I think one of the things that we often do when we think about sales folk is that we're always thinking about that top 10%. We're thinking about the top performers all the time, but they're intrinsically motivated. So these other three types, the achievers, the explorers, and particularly the socialites, the data that we have tells us that 60% of salespeople are socialites. And the reason that they work in sales is because they like the camaraderie, they want to work together, they want to compete together, and they want to achieve together. So we can't simply just, when we think about how you engage a salesperson, you can't just simply think, well, we need to engage the killers because they're the people that are making the most money. They're self-motivated. They're going to go out and do things. They're going to make magic happen. But actually, the real goal from SalesScreen's perspective is actually to try and appeal to these other groups. And how do you do that? You have different games for different people. You have different ways that you engage them. So whether, like, if we think about games that we would create for a killer, that would be a direct head-to-head competition to beat someone in a head-to-head duel. Whereas if we think about socialites, it might be a team competition. And for people that are explorers, people that like to go and collect golden eggs and things like that, that could be something that's a little bit more around the idea of having to actually work towards a common goal, or to actually achieve a goal where there's like maybe a lottery ticket at the end of it. So everyone can win, even though you're not achieving quite as much as some of the other groups. So from an intrinsic perspective, like the whole idea of engagement from a gamification perspective is about making it easy and accessible for everyone. So you're not just appealing to one group within your audience, but trying to reach all the corners of your sales team.
And defining the game with enough nuance that it can accommodate different kinds of players and focus their efforts toward a common goal. So
yeah,
it's much easier said than done, but
you touched upon this also, that, you know, we live in a different world now where people are, you know, like people want a little bit more freedom. They want a bit more flexibility. And in terms of the way they want to work, they probably want a little bit more variety in terms of like the ways that they're interacting with their organization, and just creating different ways that people can compete and people can win. It doesn't always have to be the same competition, a leaderboard over and over again, but giving people a bit of variety, it just keeps things interesting and fresh, particularly when they're not as close to the business as they might have been 2 or 3 years ago when they were more likely to be office-based than remote or hybrid.
Yeah, well, I want to introduce another idea here, which is significantly different, but related, because what you're talking about is diversity. You're defining diversity on a vector of sort of, I don't know that personality type is the right word to use, but it's sort of the how people compete and, you know, think about their role. There are other, you know, more commonly used definitions of diversity. You know, many firms have committed themselves to hiring a diverse workforce. But in fact, this also creates the same challenge, which is, well, you know, different people, they want different things. And are we managing them differently, or are we attempting to accommodate, you know, those things? And I think, Kenneth, you are an acknowledged expert in this area. I'd just love to hear you talk about this additional dimension. How do we manage diverse employees to ensure that they're also engaged?
Sure. Yeah, you know, so what we found through the conversations that we have with our client companies, both large and small, it's kind of really about awareness, right? And making an environment an equitable environment. I don't necessarily think in a lot of spaces people want different things. I think the goal is for everybody to move in unison towards the company achieving. But you know, within that framework, I think that people may need to be acknowledged a little differently sometimes as well. So I don't, you know, it's not as much as, all right, you know, it's about utilizing that diversity to better serve your end user, client, vendor, whoever that is, right? So taking that, leveraging that as a tool and a resource to just perform better. And I think when you place value there, then everybody feels like they're being heard within the organization. And you know, there's always outliers in every situation, right? Even at a homogeneous organization, you're going to have that. But ultimately, define what the goal is, long-term corporate goal, and everybody kind of moves lockstep in that. But you hear the voices of those that might feel a little disenfranchised, and you're able to add value and support what it is that they're sharing that may add value to the goal at the end. And I think once you're moving like that, and it's not, you know, there's a piece of it, it's just not rocket science. It's about being fair, right? And I think, you know, we often start putting people in these silos and verticals that maybe they weren't even looking to be in from the beginning anyway. They just wanted to come in and work and perform and be treated fairly and have the compensation aligned. So, you know, once you put those things together as an organization, and you structure it and you're fair and open about it, then that's when it starts to work.
Yeah, good. I mean, I think this is an interesting area of a management practice right now. It's like accommodating, sort of a changing definition of who we are as a workforce or a company. And now we have different kinds of people in our company, and it's not just about the most common things we think about when we think about diversity, but it's we have members, for example, tech sector firms who are now getting rid of the requirement for a college degree. This is sort of a hard and fast rule. You had to have a college degree. Well, firms are rethinking that, and they're also rethinking soft or unspoken limits on age. And these are all efforts to broaden the available pool of talent. Anyway, other ideas about how we drive engagement with the workforce.
So these tools that like Lewis is talking about, like using SalesScreen or a personality assessment or creating some sort of culture within your environment, they're all meaningless if the leaders aren't engaged themselves. We can't simply bring on those tools and hope for the best and say, be engaged. So leaders have to be the ones to promote that engagement and be engaged themselves too.
Yeah. So what are the blind spots there, Ken? I think the way you made that remark made me realize you might have learned a thing or two about this in your career. I mean, are there places where managers don't look, but they should, or shortcuts that they think they can take, but shouldn't?
Right. It's easier to take that path of least resistance. It's easier to just say we have this new software, go use it, and then check in once a month and ask them why they're not using it. That's the easy way to go about it. The right way to go about it is to implement it, hold their hand, show them how to use it, and constantly bring them back around throughout the entire process from that very onboarding experience through your tenured and senior agents. That's how you retain that engagement long term, is by the leadership constantly bringing people into the mix.
Yeah, good.
If I can kind of piggyback on some of
Please.
that, right? So you just, the organizations that are willing to bring in tools and resources like Lewis's platform, right, to support and assist their team in achieving, and just kind of understanding, hey, listen, trust us on this one. This is a resource that will allow us to maybe be more efficient, maybe kind of understand one another better, maybe increase revenue, right? And just kind of understanding, like, here's how I can support my team in getting better, and I need to provide resources that allow them to do that. I think sometimes people just say, all right, it's the same tools that we were using. Listen, if you're using the same tools that you were even using 5 years ago, you're probably not in line with where you need to be moving. And that goes back to retention, right? You start to lose people because they might feel that you're not providing a platform that allows them to be successful. So I'm in line with what Ken was saying, holding people's hands and holding them accountable, but holding yourself accountable to providing the right tools and resources for your employees is extremely important.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, also thanks for introducing this notion of accountability. It was my next question, which is sales is a little peculiar, or it's different, I should say, compared to the rest of the firm. Maybe this is an unfair or biased remark, but we hold salespeople highly accountable for results, perhaps more than other workers in the firm. And so if we're talking about driving engagement and interest in, loving where you work, and we're also hammering people for making the number, how do we balance those two things, the need for accountability and engagement? I want to go to you on this, Lewis, if you can. I know you've seen a lot of sales organizations with your clients.
This one's an interesting question, because I just don't think two things need to be mutually exclusive. It doesn't have to be a balance of one against the other. I think they actually have a really nice marriage together, and I don't think they don't always have to be like that. But I think if I think about engagement and then I think about accountability, I certainly see from my own experience that the two things can just work together in harmony. If I think about accountability, it's an employee who clearly understands the goals of a business, how they can contribute to them, how they understand, to Ken's point earlier, how they understand the why of the business. So if we arm salespeople with the right tools, if we give them the right systems, if we enable them in the right way, then they should be engaged by the simple fact that they're working towards the common shared goals of the business. So I always think about it in terms of like shining spotlights, right? So we know what good looks like we should know what good looks like as sales managers. We don't always. Sometimes we have to rely on systems in order to get us there. But if we know that the core metrics, these are the things that we need to measure, these are the things that need to be successful, whether it's call numbers, whether it's meetings, whether it's number of dials, whatever the metric is that you work upon, if we understand that and we shine a spotlight on that, we give folks the opportunity to achieve the same goals that we expect from them if we're setting the right expectations. So for me, when I think about accountability and engagement, I don't think that they need to be fighting with each other. I actually think that they can be they're very synergistic.
Great. Thanks. Well, I want to talk about the economics of our topic, which is, we're talking about many of the things we've talked about involve investments that the firm has to make in order to help managers or help salespeople drive engagement. Are those investments good? I mean, is there ROI in making investments in these areas? I just wanted to, I'd love to solicit comment from the three of you. I want to stick with Lewis on this one. I mean, obviously you have to answer this ROI question when probably with every client, every customer that you have. How do you frame it up, and how do your clients think about it? Getting return on these investments.
Yeah, there are a couple of points to your question, because the first part is obviously SalesScreen, and then there's my own perspective on this, right? And they kind of they tie hand in hand. But when we talk about our own product, I think we have to kind of be able to show an ROI in one specific factor, which is actual bottom line revenue and metrics improvements, right? So we have to be in a position where we can actually show that what we offer adds some value to a business. The way we do that is from a gamification perspective, we increase the number of metrics that go in, and therefore that has a direct correlation with bottom line revenue. So from a sales perspective, it's a nice, easy one for us to answer. If I think like more generally about my own perception of like what the impact of engagement on retention, I think you've got to split out top performers and middle and bottom performers, if I'm honest. And to Kenneth's point a little bit earlier on, like it's our job to make sure people are feeling engaged and that they have the tool set, whether they're an employee, where they sit within the employee, where they sit within the organization, whether they have a large voice, whether they don't. Top performers are intrinsically motivated. They'll go out there, they'll make magic happen, they'll do what they need to do. And while they're probably some of the most important folks when it comes to ROI, I think that, they're going to go out there, they're going to make that happen. They're already intrinsically engaged. They're motivated by the paycheck that they're receiving because they're a top performer. But where we can add the most value, I think, is those middle and bottom performers. For middle performers, we see in our data that they're the folks that actually have the highest risk of not being retained. And the reason being is because they sit just below that level, just where they're not quite a top performer, but they haven't quite achieved those goals yet. And that can make them feel like they're good enough to do it, but not quite in the right place to actually fulfill their entire potential. So those middle and bottom performers, and actually I think you might have a slide on it here, Bob, in terms of like how you motivate different groups within the organization. Not this one, but the one with the percentage increases in terms of how we impact performance. Top performers, they've been working at max already. You can squeeze out a little bit of extra juice out of those guys. But where I see that you can add the most value, whether it through engagement, whether it through gamification, through whatever form that you're going to do it, is these middle and bottom performers, where you've got the middle and performers that could achieve just that little bit extra with a bit of support and a clear idea of what metrics they could work through. But also those lower performers. Now, I think we always make the assumption that if someone's not performing, it's because they're not good enough. Whereas actually it could be just simply because we're not arming them with the right information. We're not giving them the right level of visibility. We're not telling them what good looks like. So by giving them the opportunity, by shining a spotlight on what they're doing, giving them a feeling of being part of a culture and telling them very specifically what it is that they need to accomplish within their role, we can give them an opportunity to increase their metrics. And because their metrics likely are the ones that are a little bit lower than those other two groups, that's where the most opportunity is for improvement. So it means that we can squeeze the most juice and have the biggest impact on ROI. It's not necessarily the leaders and the killers that are the ones that we can impact the most.
I mean, just logically, those other two groups, they have a greater room for improvement. So your point here is that we might lose sight of that when we focus on those that are driving the higher absolute numbers and our high performers. Yeah, I guess this is something that we've seen in coaching as well. This is a point that's often made with coaching. Is it difficult, though, with managers who, for whatever reason, are not investing the time needed to drive engagement with middle or low performers, or even to coach them? Or when we think about the firm's ability to reach out to those folks, why don't they do that? I sort of want to get maybe uncover some assumptions that managers may be quick to make about those other two populations. Is it because we discount their ability to develop?
You know, it's completely possible that it's possible. It may not be their ability to develop, but they may be burdened with other tasks that haven't allowed them the space and or time to develop, right?
Yeah.
To work on that. Like oftentimes when people, are in that space, they're required to produce numbers and metrics as well, but you're also required to mentor, sponsor, and support talent. And maybe even do some other things organizationally that it just doesn't allow you not only to invest the time into the careers of others, which kind of is a big piece of the job, but also into your own self and your own professional development. So I think sometimes they just get caught in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about that. I think it doesn't have much more of an explanation than we don't think we have time, but in fact, that's one of the most important ways to influence the business.
And don't get me wrong. I know here, sometimes that's a time management challenge as well, right?
Yeah.
So some of our people just aren't good with managing their time. So maybe we need to work on that and provide tools that allow them to do that a little better.
Right. And that's the idea. Some of the things we've heard about from Lewis is that investing in some of the tools can help optimize the available time and insights that can help managers make a difference.
I noticed a lot of managers as well try to shoulder that burden themselves, and they don't reach out for help themselves or educate their team to create partnerships or smaller teams within teams. So there's ways to manage those middle and lower performers by creating that engagement once again with those top performers as well, and using again tools like SalesScreen is a great way to do that.